In a hidden werewolf pack, a baby born with pure alpha blood did something impossible. It screamed at every powerful member who tried to hold it, the alpha, the beta, the elite warriors. The future of the pack was unraveling. Then, they brought in the scarred outcast, the omega everyone ignored. The moment his mangled hands touched the child, the room went dead silent. The baby calmed instantly. This is why that single moment of trust shattered their entire world. This child was the first alpha born in a generation, the pack's living crown jewel, yet it saw through the posturing of its leaders and chose the one wolf they had cast out. What did this infant sense that centuries of tradition had blinded the adults to? The answer lies in the brutal history of the scarred Omega, a story the pack had tried to bury. For generations, the Silverfang pack's power flowed in a simple, unbroken line, from alpha to their firstborn. The child inherits not just a title, but an instinctual aura of command known as the blood right. It's a primal force that makes even seasoned warriors instinctively bow. So when Luna Elara gave birth to a son, the entire territory celebrated. This baby boy wasn't just an heir. He was the pack's living shield, a guarantee of stability for decades to come. But the celebration was cut short by a chilling discovery. The infant, named Leo, did not radiate a gentle composure. He emanated a distress cry woven with pure alpha energy, a biological siren that frayed the nerves of every wolf in the compound. He would not feed. He would not sleep. He screamed in the presence of his own father, Alpha Theron, a leader who had unified 3 rival clans through sheer force of will. The pack's head physician, an elder named Gray, theorized it was a rare genetic flare, a sensory overload. The solution was succession. They brought in the beta, Marcus, a strategist with a calm demeanor. The baby's cries turned to shrieks of panic. They tried the gamma, the head sentinel, even the gentle omega nursemaids. Each attempt failed more spectacularly than the last. After 72 hours, the pack house was a pressure cooker of dread. A baby with alpha blood was withering away, rejecting the very hierarchy it was born to lead. Whispers began. Was this a curse? A sign of poor leadership? But one wolf was never considered. Kale. He lived in a renovated tool shed at the territory's edge. His face was a map of old violence. 3 deep claw marks gouged from his temple to his jaw, a gift from a rogue bear attack 5 years prior. He had been a promising sentinel once, but the scars weren't just physical. They marked him as damaged goods, a reminder of failure. His wolf had been silenced in the attack, leaving him unable to fully shift, a condition seen as profound weakness. He was given the title of Keeper of the Silent Woods, a poetic way of saying he was the pack's groundskeeper and trash collector. While the crisis unfolded in the main house, Kale was where he always was, in the ancient pine grove, the pack's sacred burial ground. It was there that the first crack in the official story appeared. The bear attack hadn't been a simple patrol tragedy. Kale had been on a covert mission with the former Alpha, Theron's father, to secure a disputed mineral vein. They were ambushed. Kale, then the Alpha's personal guard, took the full force of the assault, allowing the old Alpha to escape. The official report called it a heroic setback. The unofficial truth, buried by the new leadership, was that the ambush was a setup by a rival pack that had secretly brokered a deal with a faction within Silverfang. Kale's scars were evidence of a betrayal, and his silenced wolf made him a convenient, non-threatening witness to be pushed aside. He never spoke of it. He simply tended to the graves, his loyalty transferred from living alphas to dead ones. Back in the nursery, Alpha Theron was facing mutiny. His inner circle was exhausted, their wolves agitated by the baby's constant psychic distress. Desperation breeds improbable choices. It was the oldest Omega nursemaid, a woman named Maizay, who remembered Kale as a bright-eyed pup, who voiced the forbidden idea. The child rejects all the noise, she murmured, avoiding Theron's gaze. He rejects the ambition, the politics, the hidden anger he senses in you all. There is one among us who carries no noise, only silence. The suggestion was met with outrage. Bringing the disfigured outcast near the Alpha heir was unthinkable. But as little Leo's vital signs began to dip, Theron, backed into a corner, gave a grim nod. 2 enforcers were sent to fetch Kale from the graves. Kale entered the main house for the first time in years, the scent of panic and polished wood assaulting his senses. He was led not to the Alpha's study, but to the nursery doorway. He could see the bundled child in the center of the room, surrounded by worried faces, its tiny body trembling with exhausted silent sobs. The moment Kale's scarred face appeared at the threshold, a hush fell. The baby, Leo, stopped trembling. His head, with a strength that startled the physician, turned toward the door. His wide silver-blue eyes, mirroring his father's, fixed on Kale. He made a soft, hiccuping sound. Not a cry, a question. Alpha Theron, his pride warring with paternal fear, gave a sharp, reluctant jerk of his chin. Do not touch him, just stand there. Kale took one step into the room. Then another. He moved with a quiet grace that his role as groundskeeper had never erased. He stopped a few feet from the ornate crib, his head bowed in submission, his scarred profile to the child. For 10 seconds, 20, the only sound was the crackling fireplace. Then, Leo did what he had refused to do for anyone. He relaxed. His little fists unclenched. A long, shuddering sigh escaped him, and he drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. The room was utterly silent, not with dread, but with awe. The broken wolf had done what the mighty could not, but this moment of peace was not a solution. It was a detonator. Alpha Theron's eyes, initially wide with relief, narrowed into slits of cold, calculating fury. His heir, the symbol of his dynasty, had just chosen a broken outcast over him. And in the world of wolves, such an instinctual choice is never an accident. It is a verdict. Theron's solution was not gratitude, but containment. He issued a new decree. Kale was to be the child's sole nighttime attendant, a seemingly merciful promotion that was, in reality, a gilded cage. He was moved from his toolshed to a small, windowless room adjacent to the nursery. His sacred groundskeeper duties were reassigned. The message was clear. His sole purpose was now to be a living pacifier for the Alpha heir, and he would be kept close, watched and controlled. To the pack, it looked like a strange but pragmatic mercy. To Kale, it felt like being buried alive in the heart of the den. For little Leo, however, it was salvation. With Kale's silent, steady presence in the room, the baby not only slept but thrived. His weight increased. His silver-blue eyes, once clouded with distress, now tracked Kale's movements with calm curiosity. A bizarre, quiet rhythm developed. Kale would sit in a wooden chair, mending old leather harnesses or simply staring at the wall, and the baby would contentedly watch him, gurgling softly. No lullabies were sung. No words were exchanged. The bond was wordless, woven from shared silence. But this piece was an island in a sea of rising tension. Every time Alpha Theron entered the nursery, Leo would stiffen, his lower lip quivering. The rejection was a quiet, consistent rebuke that ate at the Alpha's authority like acid. Theron's mate, Luna Elara, watched this dynamic with a mother's piercing insight and a politician's growing dread. She began to notice details others missed. The baby's calm was not passive. On the 2 occasions a lower-ranked enforcer, a wolf known for cruel teasing, had entered on patrol. Leo had let out a sharp, warning cry until the man left. The infant wasn't just soothed by Kale's silence. He was using Kale as a filter, reacting to the hidden intentions Kale himself could sense but no longer challenge. Elara, trapped between her love for her son and her duty to her mate, started secretly visiting the archives. She was looking for precedents, for any lore about alpha-born children with discerning instincts. What she found buried in a century-old bestiary journal chilled her blood. A single sentence, written by a long-dead seer: when the cub rejects the crown, it smells the rot upon it. The rot, it turned out, had a very specific financial scent. While Kale tended to the heir, Theron and his beta, Marcus, were finalizing a massive territory deal with the neighboring Stormcrest pack. The agreement would cede a portion of the sacred pine grove, the very burial grounds Kale tended for logging rights, and a modern training facility. It was a pragmatic, modern move that would boost the pack's wealth. But the grove was protected by ancient treaty, sworn on the graves of the very fallen Kale cared for. The old Alpha, Theron's father, had nearly gone to war to defend it. The rumor among the elders was that the mineral vein from the ambush 5 years prior lay just beneath that grove. Theron wasn't just selling trees, he was preparing to mine the blood-soaked ground where his father's honor had been bought with Kale's scars. Kale, of course, was told nothing of the deal, but he felt its approach. Pack politics hummed through the house like a change in barometric pressure. He saw the Stormcrest envoys with their calculating eyes. He overheard fragments of arguments about legacy and progress between Theron and the pack's few remaining traditionalists. The agitation seeped into him, and because he was now a silent mirror for the Alpha heir, it seeped into Leo. The baby began having fits again, but only during the day when Theron and his inner circle were active. At night, with Kale, he was calm. This pattern became impossible to ignore, and it birthed a dangerous faction within the pack. The older wolves, the ones who remembered the old Alpha and the suspicious ambush, started looking at Kale not as a broken tool, but as a living barometer of the pack's conscience. Whispers of the cub's judgment began to circulate. Theron's response was swift and brutal. He publicly accused Kale of using subtle pheromonal manipulation to turn the heir against his rightful alpha. It was a masterstroke of political framing. It pathologized the baby's pure instinct and painted Kale as a malicious, clever manipulator exploiting a child's vulnerability. Kale was summoned to the Great Hall, not as an attendant, but as a defendant. He stood before the assembled pack, his scars stark in the torchlight, surrounded by the hostile auras of the Alpha's guards. Theron demanded he confess to poisoning the heir's mind. Kale said nothing. He simply bowed his head, the picture of defeated weakness. This infuriated Theron further. "Your silence condemns you," he roared. He declared Kale would be banished at dawn, severed from the pack mind link, and sent into the human world. The baby would have to adapt. Justice, Theron declared, was more important than comfort. That night, the gilded cage became a prison. Kale was locked in his small room, an enforcer posted outside. He was to have no final contact with the child. But as midnight approached, a different sound cut through the compound. It wasn't Leo's cry. It was a collective, pained howl that erupted from the minds of every pack member, the telepathic scream of a bond breaking. Luna Elara, using her authority, had done the unthinkable. She had formally severed a section of her own mate bond with Theron, a searing, painful act of spiritual divorce used only in cases of profound betrayal or danger. The psychic shockwave staggered the entire pack. In the aftermath, pale and shaking but radiating furious resolve, Elara marched past the stunned enforcer, unlocked Kale's door, and pointed to the nursery. "He is dying," she said, her voice raw. "My mate's pride is killing my son." "You are not his poison, you are his antidote. Go cut." Kale entered the nursery to find Leo in the grip of a terrifying seizure, his small body rigid, his aura flickering like a guttering candle. The bond with his father, strained to its limit by Theron's anger, and the impending banishment of the one being he trusted, was causing a catastrophic psychic feedback loop. The baby was quite literally rejecting his own bloodline to the point of self-destruction. Without a word, Kale went to the crib. He did not pick the child up. He simply placed his scarred hand on the baby's chest, over the tiny, racing heart. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, he tried to reach for the part of him that had been silenced, his wolf. There was no shift, no growl, but a warmth, a faint, golden ember of pure, protective instinct, flowed from his palm. It was the last untainted remnant of the loyal guard he had once been. Leo's seizure stopped. His body went limp, then relaxed into a deep, natural sleep. The invisible storm in the room cleared. Elara, watching from the doorway, understood everything. This was no manipulation. This was sanctuary. A pure, unsullied spark of the pack's true spirit, preserved in a broken vessel, was shielding the future from the corruption of the present. But this act of salvation had been witnessed. The enforcer had fled to report to Theron. The Alpha, humiliated by his mate's bond severance and now faced with definitive proof that his heir's life depended on the outcast, arrived at the nursery door, his fury now colder, deadlier, and absolute. He looked at the scene, his disloyal mate, the scarred outcast with a hand on his son, and the child sleeping peacefully because of it. His rule, his legacy, his very identity, were being dismantled by this silent alliance. Theron's eyes, glowing with feral rage, locked not on Kale, but on the baby. "If the branch is rotten," he whispered, a vow more terrifying than any shout, "you prune it and you burn it." He had just decided that a future he could not absolutely control was a future not worth having. Theron did not act with the hot rage of a father, but with the cold precision of a CEO executing a hostile takeover. His target was not Kale, but the baby's very legitimacy. At a dawn council, he stood before his pack, his face a mask of pained duty. He announced that the heir, Leo, was clearly afflicted with a profound spiritual sickness, a bond psychosis triggered by Kale's damaged aura. The child's rejection of his alpha was not a judgment, he argued, but a symptom. Therefore, for the safety of the pack's future, the infant would be taken to a remote, sacred moon pool deep in the territory, a place of pure, untapped magic, to undergo a cleansing ritual. It was a masterful lie, woven from half-truths and spiritual jargon. The moon pool was real, its waters could, in law, strengthen a weak bond. But the ritual Theron described did not exist. His true plan was far darker, an accident, a tragic, unavoidable misfortune where a sickly infant, separated from his toxic crutch, would succumb to the wild elements. He would return a grieving father, his problematic heir, and the outcast who caused it all removed in one tragic sweep. Luna Elara was placed under guard, her bond severance used as proof of her unstable influence. The pack,
confused and fearful, acquiesced. Tradition demanded they trust their alpha's grim verdict.
Kale was to be imprisoned until the ritual was complete, then banished. But Theron, in his arrogance, made one fatal error. He needed the baby to be calm for the journey to the remote site, to avoid raising suspicion. So he ordered Kale to accompany them, to be the pacifier until the very edge of the ritual grounds. It was a logistical decision that handed Kale one final, desperate chance. The journey was a somber procession. Theron, his beta Marcus, and 4 loyal enforcers traveled on foot toward the mountainous interior. Kale walked in the center, carrying Leo in a sling against his chest. The baby, sensing the tension and the dangerous intent radiating from his father, was quiet but watchful, his small hands fisted in Kale's shirt. As they climbed higher, the air grew thin and cold. Kale could feel the plan unfolding. He saw the looks between the enforcers, the way they subtly checked the steep drop-offs along the narrow path. The ritual site was a barren, rocky basin holding a small ice-fed pool. It was a place of stark beauty and absolute isolation. Here, Theron declared, the pack would wait at the tree line. Only he, the child, and the source of the sickness, Kale, would approach the water's edge for the preliminary prayers. This was the moment. As they stepped onto the flat stones by the pool, Theron turned to Kale, his pretense gone. "Put him down," he commanded, nodding to a flat rock. "Your service ends here." Kale knew if he released the child, Leo would be in the water within minutes, and he would be dead seconds later. He met Theron's eyes for the first time without submission. He shook his head, a minute, defiant movement. Theron's smile was thin. "Then you choose to watch him die first." The Alpha shifted. Not a full, controlled shift, but a brutal, partial transformation that bulged his muscles and extended his claws. A display of raw power meant for terror. He lunged, not for Kale but to rip the baby from his arms. Kale did the only thing he could. He turned his back, curling his body around Leo, taking the full, raking impact of Theron's claws across his already scarred shoulders. The force knocked him to his knees at the water's edge. Blood, hot and dark, splashed onto the stones and dripped into the moon pool, but he did not let go of the child. Enraged, Theron grabbed a fistful of Kale's hair, yanking his head back to expose his throat for the killing bite. And that's when the forgotten variable made its move. Little Leo, pressed between Kale's chest and the stone, smeared with Kale's blood and vibrating with terror, did not cry out. He did something only an alpha born with a fully awakened blood right could do. He emitted a silent, high-frequency pulse of pure command, a stillness wave. The effect was instantaneous and bizarre. Theron froze mid-snarl, his muscles locking, a low groan of shock trapped in his throat. The enforcers of the tree line stumbled, clutching their heads. The very forest birds fell silent. The pulse was a biological override, a desperate command for stop. It lasted only 3 seconds, but it cost the infant dearly. Leo went limp, his aura guttering, the massive expenditure of energy sending him into a state of shock. Those 3 seconds of purchased time, however, changed everything. Kale, acting on an instinct deeper than thought, plunged his bloodied hand into the ice-cold moon pool, and then brought his wet, dripping palm to the baby's forehead, as if anointing him. The reaction was not magical, but biological. The moon pool's water was saturated with unique mineral ions. Combined with Kale's blood, the blood of a werewolf whose unique physiology had been altered by a sacred bear's venom 5 years prior, and the child's own potent alpha essence, it triggered a latent DNA marker. A visible bioluminescent shimmer, like dust motes of silver light, erupted from Leo's skin where Kale's hand touched. It swirled in the air, and then, as if seeking a source, flowed not toward the frozen alpha, but back onto Kale, settling over his old scars. The jagged lines on his face and shoulders began to glow with a soft, silver light. From the tree line, Beta Marcus, a scholar of old lore, gasped. He recognized the phenomenon from a forgotten text. It was called a lineage echo. The glowing scars weren't just wounds, they were a map. The baby's alpha blood, in its moment of ultimate need, had used the unique chemistry of Kale's blood and the sacred water to reveal a hidden truth. The pattern of the scars mirrored the exact heraldic marking of the true original alpha line of the territory, a line thought extinguished a century ago. The bear hadn't just scarred Kale, it had, in a cruel twist of fate, carved the signature of a lost king into the flesh of his last descendant. Kale wasn't just a disgraced guard, he was lost royalty. And the baby hadn't chosen an outcast. He had recognized, on a primal level, the true, dormant alpha in the room. The stillness wave broke. Theron stumbled back, his fury now mingled with supernatural dread. He stared at the glowing scars, at the unconscious air, at the revelation shining in the mountain air. His plan was in ashes.
His authority was unraveling. And in that moment of stunned silence, a new sound rose. It was the howl of Luna Ilara, amplified by the pack mind link she had fought to partially reopen. It was a howl of maternal fury and calling, broadcasting the scene's terrifying energy signature to every wolf in the territory. She wasn't just calling for help, she was issuing a verdict. The enforcers at the tree line looked at their frozen alpha, at the glowing outcast, at the dying heir, and their loyalty shattered. They did not attack. They simply turned and melted into the trees, fleeing toward the howl, toward the pack, to report what they had witnessed.
Theron was alone on the mountain with a secret that had just burst into the open, a rival alpha he had tortured for years, and an heir who had just rejected him with the full force of his birthright. His empire had crumbled in the space of a minute. But a cornered alpha with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous beast of all. He looked at Kale, who was cradling Leo, trying to warm the unconscious child, his scars still fading from silver to pink, renewed flesh. A lost prince, Theron spat, the words dripping with venomous mockery. How poetic, it doesn't matter. The pack follows strength, not fairy tales. And you are still broken. He began to circle, shifting fully now, a massive, silver-furred wolf with murder in his eyes. He knew he had to kill them both and control the narrative before the pack arrived. The spiritual battle was over. Now, only the physical one remained. And Kale, for the first time since his wolf was silenced, felt a faint, answering growl stir in the depths of his own chest. The fight for the soul of the Silverfang pack would be decided not by decree, but by tooth and claw. The fight was not between an alpha and an omega. It was between a king who had forgotten his duty and a guardian who had never known anything else. As the massive silver wolf lunged, Kale did not try to shift. He couldn't. Instead, he rolled, using his own body as a shield for the unconscious child in his arms, taking the brutal impact on his back and shoulders. Bones cracked. Agony, white-hot and familiar, seared through him. But the growl that had stirred in his chest didn't fade. It grew. It was not the sound of a beast claiming territory. It was the low, unwavering rumble of a sentinel holding the line. Theron attacked with the fury of a storm, all slashing claws and crushing jaws. Kale fought with the desperate economy of a soldier who had been surviving on scraps for years. He dodged, weaved, used the rocky terrain, always keeping himself between the wolf and the child. He was being torn apart. But with each blow, a strange thing happened. The ghost of his wolf, silent for so long, didn't retreat further. It pressed forward, not to take over, but to fortify. It channeled every ounce of its remaining essence into a single frayed instinct. Protect the cub, protect the future. Kale's blood, rich with the moon pool's energy and his own revealed lineage, soaked into the ground. He was losing, but he was not breaking. And then the child stirred. Leo, weak but aware, opened his eyes. He saw the monster of his father bearing down on the only safety he had ever known. This time, he did not emit a commanding pulse. He reached out, not with power, but with connection. His tiny hand, smeared with Kale's blood, pressed against Kale's chest, over his heart. In that moment, the incomplete, one-sided bond between guardian and heir snapped into a true, reciprocal circuit. The baby's potent, pure alpha energy did not overpower Kale's silenced wolf, it offered it a lifeline. It gave the crippled beast a reason to roar again. A sound like tearing leather and cracking stone echoed through the basin. Kale did not fully shift. He underwent a transformation unseen in the pack's history. His body remade itself not into a wolf, but into a perfect hybrid of man and sentinel. His muscles corded with renewed strength, his teeth sharpened, and his eyes blazed with a fierce gold light. But most astonishingly, the glowing scars on his face and shoulders did not vanish. They solidified into ridges of silver-kissed tissue, like natural armor, like a crown of wounds turned to medals. He stood, placing Leo gently behind a sheltering rock, and turned to face Theron. For the first time, he spoke, his voice a gravel blend of man and myth. You will not touch him again. The final clash was short and brutal. Theron fought with the rage of entitlement. Kale fought with the focused clarity of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. When Theron went for a killing lunge, Kale didn't meet him with equal force. He sidestepped and used Theron's own momentum, combined with a precise, devastating strike to the neck, to slam the alpha wolf onto the stone ground with enough force to stun him. Before Theron could rise, Kale was on him, a knee pinning his ribcage, a hand transformed into a clawed vise at his throat. He could have ripped it out. The beast within him screamed too. But the man, the guardian, looked into the eyes of the wolf that had been his alpha, and he saw not a monster, but a tragic, hollowed-out ruin. He hesitated.
That hesitation was answered not by more violence, but by the arrival of the pack. Luna Ilara crested the ridge first, followed by Beta Marcus, the elders, and dozens of warriors. They froze, taking in the scene, their alpha, defeated and pinned by the glowing, transformed outcast. The heir, safe but watching from behind a rock, the truth of the confrontation hanging in the air. No one moved to attack Kael. The evidence was written in blood, in magic, and in the silent judgment of the infant. Beta Marcus stepped forward, his head bowed not to Theron, but to Kael. The lineage echo is confirmed, he announced to the pack, his voice thick with awe. The blood rite has spoken.
It has chosen its vessel, Theron, under Kael's knee, shifted back to his human form, broken and gasping. He looked up at his pack and saw no salvation in their eyes, only a terrible, quiet acknowledgement. He had lost. Not just the fight, but everything. Ilara walked to the rock and gathered Leo into her arms. She then turned to face her mate, her expression one of profound, unyielding grief. "By the laws of the moon and the pack," she declared, her voice carrying, "I, Luna Ilara, witness the failure. I uphold the cub's judgment. The bond is shattered. The throne is forfeit. The consequences were absolute. Theron was not killed. He was stripped of his title, his mind link severed completely, and banished from the territory with nothing but the clothes on his back. To be packless is a living death for a wolf, but it was the mercy Kael's nature demanded over the vengeance his beast desired. The corrupt deal with the Stormcrest pack was nullified by the new regime. Beta Marcus, his loyalty transferring to the revealed truth, became Kael's chief advisor, tasked with undoing the financial manipulations. But who would lead? The pack turned to Kael. He who had been scarred, silent, and steadfast. He who had been chosen by the future. He refused the traditional title of Alpha. He said he had not earned it through conquest, but had been revealed by sacrifice. He took the ancient forgotten title of Regent Guardian, sworn to protect and guide the true Alpha heir, Leo, until he came of age. His first decree was to permanently protect the sacred pine grove. His second was to dismantle the rigid hierarchy that had allowed corruption to fester, promoting wolves based on loyalty and merit, not bloodline politics. The surprising detail, the final twist, came weeks later during the first full moon under the new order. As the pack gathered, Kael, now fully healed and his wolf restored but forever marked by his silver-kissed scars, stood beside Ilara, who had taken the title of Dowager Luna and Mother of the Realm. Little Leo, thriving now, was held in her arms. When the moon reached its zenith, the baby did not cry or fuss. He looked at Kael, raised a chubby hand, and babbled a single, clear first word. Not Mama, not Papa. The word was Kael. It was a name, it was a title, it was an acceptance. In that moment, the pack knew the transition was complete. The infant had not just chosen a protector. He had named the foundation upon which his future kingdom would be built. The rot had been pruned. A new growth, nurtured by silence and sacrifice, had begun. The story of the Silverfang pack teaches us that the most powerful truths are often those that cannot be shouted, only felt. A baby's instinct, pure and unfiltered by ambition, saw through the glittering facade of power and recognized the one soul uncorrupted by it. In a world obsessed with rank and roar, the silent guardian and the choosing cub remind us that true leadership isn't about dominating the pack, it's about hearing its faintest heartbeat. It's about being the shelter in the storm you never asked for. Theron built an empire on force and forgot it needed a foundation of trust. Kael, with no empire at all, built that foundation in silence, one act of unnoticed loyalty at a time. And in the end, the future chose the foundation over the empire. So the next time you feel overlooked, or outcast, or silent in a room full of noise, remember, you may not be wearing a crown. But you might just be holding up the wall it sits upon. If you were captivated by this journey of instinct, betrayal, and silent strength, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that true worth is often hidden in plain sight. And subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that remind us why character will always outlast power. Let me know in the comments, whose side were you on from the very beginning?